want to welcome everybody and thanks for attending our webinar today. So we're going to be talking today with Alan Fogwill, and the topic is looking at the cost benefit of distributed generation in Canada. So just a few words about us before we get started. So 360 Energy has been around since 1995. We've been delivering continuous improvement for customers by embedding energy management practices that measure energy and environmental costs and prove they're controllable. We design and implement energy strategies in order to make an organization's carbon footprint, an organization's carbon footprint and avoid unnecessary energy costs. Today's presentation is part of an ongoing series of webinars that we're doing and that we've been presenting to keep corporate leaders objectively informed of the many changes, which does include risks and opportunities occurring in the energy industry. In today's webinar, Alan Fogwill, who's the President and CEO of CERI, will present the findings of a CERI study that provides an in-depth cost-benefit analysis of distributed generation in Canada. The study separates the economic analysis from the private and public perspectives. Just before we get started, just want to make a few housekeeping notes. Today's webinar, we will be keeping our lines muted so background noise doesn't interfere with the presentation itself. We do encourage people to use the questions feature and go to webinar to ask questions. Alan will be keeping an eye on that, and he'll be answering questions as we go along, and maybe a few at the end too if some more questions kind of come up. Just also wanted to mention that we have some upcoming webinars as well. The next one we have is on May 20th. We're going to be having Heidelberg Cement from Northern Europe describing their path to carbon neutral concrete products. And on May 28th, we're actually going to have a repeat of a popular webinar of ours on zero emissions. So if you missed that before, we're going to have that. You can also check out our website and find a list of our past webinars as well. So thanks again very much for attending today. And without any further ado, I will hand this over to Alan. So thanks for joining us today, Alan.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's great to be able to share our research information with various stakeholders. As I always mention to folks when we're doing these presentations, this research and these research reports are being generated for the public interest. And what we're trying to show is the economic consequences of various decisions. It doesn't necessarily mean you don't do them if they're more expensive. It's just important to know how much things cost. I mean, when I go to the grocery store, I don't just pick up everything and put it into my cart. My wife has told me that I shouldn't be doing that. I have to actually look at how much things cost before it goes into the cart. So this is just another aspect of it. And you know, oftentimes I'll put things in that are more expensive than otherwise, but then I know the full consequences of my purchase decisions, and I think everyone should. So what I'm presenting today is our results for looking at the opportunities for distributed generation in Canada. And as many of the folks on the line are likely from Ontario, I've used our Ontario numbers in our analysis, although we've looked at many provinces and we focused on a few, including Ontario, Nova Scotia, Alberta, and British Columbia, to get a more in-depth view of where the economic costs or benefits lie. So a little bit about CERI. We're a nonprofit registered charity that conducts a number of market studies each year in electricity, natural gas, and oil. Some of the work that we do allows us to really get a good overview for our major decisions and debates going forward in terms of a lower carbon energy transition, and what that actually means in terms of how much things are going to cost for the economy generally, and for folks that are buying energy services at the retail level. We are very grateful for the funding we received from numerous organizations. Here they are on the list. I'll just mention the top three being Alberta Energy, Natural Resources Canada, and the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, and a number of other organizations that you see identified here. We're always open to having those discussions about potential funding with any partners. So if you are aware of any opportunities for that, please don't hesitate to contact me. So we're going to talk a little bit today about distributed generation, and there's a lot of debate and discussion going on about it. And you know, some are identifying that it's a good thing in terms of managing our carbon emissions. Others identify it as a means of improving the cost effectiveness of your company's operations, and still others look at it in terms of what it means for the overall improvement in our electricity grids. So just quickly about distributed generation, you can see from this slide that DG has been around for a long time, and it encompasses a number of assets at the distribution level that are decentralized from what we see in North America as our centralized grid. It means you know, generation at the house level or at the company level, and avoiding the use of the grid transmission assets and the distribution assets to a certain extent. So we're in our study, we looked at the use of DG at certain nameplate capacities, going from 1 kilowatt to 15 megawatts. And just as an aside, we're looking at a backup generator for an airport, which is fairly large, is 4 to 5 megawatts. So you're only really going to get into those larger sizes for institutional complexes like universities and colleges, or major industrial activities, or even large commercial buildings. Now, while we have looked at all the potential for different technologies at the distributed level, by far the most popular option in Canada these days is solar. So you'll see a lot of information in here about solar, but there'll be other information about the biomass or geothermal, a little bit about hydro in the report, but not as much in the presentation itself. And the report should be out in about 3 weeks. Just look for it on our website at CERI.ca. So when you look at the benefits to distributed generation, you have to consider the different perspectives. So there's the DG owner, there's the utility customer, the utility owner, and society at large. So when we look at this, we're trying to identify where those costs and benefits are, and where the greatest opportunities are for a distributed generation. Sorry, I think I got a blank slide here. Let me get it all, there we go. So again, we're just exemplifying how we've compartmentalized the various issues. So we're looking at it by population center. So we've gone right down to the various population centers. We have a electricity dispatch grid model for all the provinces, and we run them based on where the GG is assumed to happen in the various provinces, and you see solar PV, biomass, and municipal solid waste, and natural gas combined heat and power as our key technology options that we focused on. A little bit about the different programs that are out there. There's a number of programs that have been available for use by the different provinces, and you see that the common drivers here are related to climate policies, promotion of renewable energy, local economies, and enhanced electricity access. None of these necessarily result in lower cost options. They're really related to addressing other policy questions that the governments and utilities have to deal with. Now, on this slide, this is just a summary of some of the market-based programs that have been put in place. And you see that for Ontario, there's net metering programs related to renewable energy technologies. And you also see the types of compensation mechanisms. And that's very extremely important in terms of looking at the private sector business case. It doesn't necessarily affect the overall economics from a society point of view, because all you're doing there is adjusting who pays. It's either the proponent pays, or other people within the service area pay, or the utilities or governments for that matter. Another set of procurement programs related to renewable energy technologies, and you can see for Ontario there was programs in place right up to 10 megawatts. So some of the results of the activities in Ontario, you see that the contracted capacity for the RESOP program is 825 megawatts. Recall that peak load in Ontario is in it varies. I guess it's in the 20 to 25,000 megawatts. So this is a small addition, the large fit, the small fit, the micro fit, and you can see that the majority of the DG activities have been solar. So when we get into the technology assessments, you look here and you see that the solar PV is the most common in terms of customer use. Also municipal solid waste. The difference there, of course, it can provide power on demand, which solar can't, which is a significant issue when it comes to the societal benefits of solar, as well as combined heat and power for natural gas. Here is just an assessment of the solar systems that could be available in the different provinces. You see here that we've got annual production of 6,000 kilowatt hours a year annually, which can be significant. But you can also see here, which is one of the issues that comes up with respect to solar PV as a societal benefit, is the low capacity factor. Now, these capacity factors are often larger for grid-based solar projects, but they are not as large for municipal solar projects, just because of the siting constraints that people have to deal with. Again, just sort of stressing with the production values for solar PV, looking at it over the months, and of course the summer months are the highest and the winter months are the lowest. And what that sort of suggests then is they are not necessarily available when the system needs to manage some of its peaks. And that's a very key consideration when it comes to looking at the societal benefits. We look at here at the capital costs in Ontario and British Columbia, and also the retail rates. And the costs you can see are below the retail price in Ontario, but above the retail price in British Columbia. The grid there is much cheaper to run and provide service. So in British Columbia, some of these projects are not cost effective under any scenarios, whereas in Ontario, they can be cost effective from a private sector point of view. But it depends on whether or not you are able to offset the full retail rate, or if it's just the energy commodity, or if it's the energy commodity and the global adjustment charge. Just as reference, the hourly Ontario electricity price last year averaged about 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So you can see that if you're just looking at just displacing the energy cost itself, these are not cost effective. If you're looking at displacing the full retail rate, they are cost effective. This is just looking at it under different discount rates for a commercial plant or for a commercial operation. And again, you see that the retail price in Ontario is much higher than it is in British Columbia. So the same situation applies. If you're able to offset the full retail charge, including transmission and distribution charges, it makes sense from a private sector point of view. If those charges cannot be offset from a societal point of view, someone else is paying. On the biomass side, and municipal solid waste, there's a couple of different options. If we're looking at incineration with steam turbines or gasification, they'll have different costs. So these are the two main differences that you see in terms of municipal solid waste. However, some people are hesitant to accept municipal solid waste as a means of addressing not only the waste issue, but electricity generation, because it means incineration of the waste. And there's a number of jurisdictions across the country where incineration is not allowed. And here you can see that even in those situations where it could be allowed, you're looking at a levelized cost of electricity for energy that's quite high, and it's going to be higher in most situations. So again, you have to look at what are the other benefits associated with the biomass assessment, aside from just it being a pure electricity generation option. Recall that new generation at the grid level across the country averages about 6 to 7 cents. So that's much cheaper than what we see here. And that average goes for mostly wind and natural gas combined cycle. Again, you're talking about with municipal solid waste, that was a biomass assessment. You're looking at levelized costs that are higher than those for the grid. This is just to show that we can see that there are some benefits on the thermal side for the host facility, but we're still talking about, for electricity generation, significant costs. Again, we're looking, in this case, the CHP following the thermal demand of the host facility is much more cost effective because you're just sizing it for the thermal load and not for electricity generation. So when you're looking at CHP units, that is probably a fundamental question to answer is, how are you managing the thermal capacity? And this means you have some ability to export the electricity, but nowhere near the, if you were looking at a CHP unit that was dedicated towards electricity production. Now, the key thing about the private sector view related to the business case of distributed generation is how you're going to get billed. Here are different compensation mechanisms that we see, but in essence, what it means is, are you able to avoid the transmission and distribution charges of the host utility that you're in? And that would probably come from a dual metering setup where you are identified as consuming at some point and producing at another point, and there's an offset to your full retail bill. But if you're paying the full charge for your monthly service as a retail customer, and then only getting credit for the energy that you're putting back into the grid, it's not necessarily going to be cost effective from a private sector point of view. Now, we didn't want to identify really the break-even price. We wanted to just identify what would be the simple payback for a private DG owner in Ontario with solar. And you can see from this slide that the time period is significant. It's 8 years for small commercial and 12.5 years for residential. In a lot of cases, the literature suggests that that simple payback period is too long. However, there are some people, especially in the residential sector, who've used the non-economic benefits of solar higher, and as a result, they probably accept a simple payback of 12.5 years. But it is a long payback period, and it means that the vast majority of DG owners would look at this and say that's insufficient. The other aspect to consider when you're looking at a residential system on your home is whether or not it actually affects, positively affects the resale value of the house. Because if you're not in the home for 12.5 years and you need to sell the home after 5 years, do you get your money back from the remainder of that investment? And it's difficult to say. One of the analogies that we use here is having a swimming pool. Some people look at a swimming pool as a selling feature for their home, and buyers are very interested in that. Others won't buy a home with a pool. So we don't have enough information to suggest whether there is a significant value improvement on the resale of homes with homes that have a DG solar system in place. So one of the big issues we had to deal with was looking at what are the transmission and distribution benefits and costs related to distributed generation. And again, we're looking at solar. And you can see here we've done a number of calculations. There was no indication in our analysis that you were going to delay or defer any major transmission or distribution infrastructure investment. And that is a matter of a lot of debate in this country as folks look at these DG options as a means to not only help themselves, but help the system overall. from our analysis, the major element that you're able to avoid are the electricity system losses. And we've noted here that in this case, where we have 25% of detached homes in Ontario having an installed 5 kilowatt solar PV system. So that's 25% of homes in Ontario have a PV system on their roof. You get about a 1% improvement in the summer peak. 1%, which is, in our view, insufficient to make any significant adjustments to the overall requirement for transmission and distribution investments. However, we do see significant losses going to the utilities as a result of, for example, net billing. So the revenue losses here was 490 million. So who pays for that? Now, this is assuming, of course, that the DG owner avoids the retail charge. So this is the net billing option. So if the DG owner avoids the retail charge, someone else has to pay for it. So you can see here that there is a very limited impact from a societal point of view that supports distributed generation, even at a high penetration rate of 25%. So I just want to end here and just identify that I'll re-echo a point I made at the beginning. Distributed generation can be seen as a means of assisting with other non-economic options in terms of greater equity and local economic investments and local economic activity. But from a systems point of view, it's not a significant impact on how the system would operate, such that there is a net societal benefit from an economic perspective of including significant amounts of DG. We just have very cheap electricity grids, and it means that that benchmark is very challenging for any new technology to try and offset that. If you're only able to offset the energy charges and only for that time period that you are producing, the business case for distributed generation is extremely challenging. If you're able to offset the entire retail charge, it makes it a lot easier, especially in Ontario, but not necessarily in all the provinces. In Ontario, it's a much higher retail charge, which means that the benchmark for savings is easier to overcome compared to other provinces. So that's all I wanted to identify. We have a couple of events that are coming up. There's a webinar on May the 26th where we look at the historical effectiveness of greenhouse gas emissions management policies in Canada and in Europe and in the United States. In some cases, that's been a positive. In some cases, that hasn't been effective. We also have a petrochemical conference coming up in September that, assuming the economy opens, will carry on at that time. So I want to thank you for your attendance on this presentation, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks very much, Alan. Just a reminder to everybody to use the question function in the control panel for the webinar. Meanwhile, we've actually got a couple of questions here in-house. I'm going to hand the phone over to David Arkell just to ask a question here.
Thanks very much, Alan, for reviewing that. Listen, it looks, quite frankly, pretty bleak for the distributed generation, but I was interested in what conditions would have to change in Canada to actually make this more of a positive opportunity for distributed generation. What is what policies or utility rules or regulations would have to be modified to make it positive, if there is such a thing?
Well, we already have some rules in place that do help DG, and that's the net billing, where you actually avoid the full retail charge. So from a private sector point of view, they can be cost effective because you are avoiding that charge. In Ontario, I mean, if you look at the example we used in BC, the overall charges are a lot lower, and therefore the hurdle is more significant. So there's already some support for that. From a societal point of view, if you're looking at the grid overall, you're going to have to look at storage. And we did a study last year looking at battery storage, and the costs associated with batteries are right now are high, but they are coming down. There's the technologies are maturing, and we think that within about 5 years, if you're able to combine solar DG, for example, with battery storage, then you're going to have a greater impact on the grid, because you can commit to a specific offset on a long-term firm basis. So I would say we're still in the phase, not necessarily in terms of the generation technologies, but rather the storage technologies that some government support for advancing that maturation of those technologies would be beneficial and would maybe accelerate the societal benefits, because we still have a system that is designed and has to operate under the extreme conditions, and that's how we've built our systems in order to get it to a 99.99 whatever % reliability factor. And until that changes and we're able to accept a lower service quality, which means less reliability, we're still going to be in a position where we're going to be forced into these additional investments on the transmission and distribution system to account for that 1 hour of one day during the year when everyone needs that power and the DG is not available. I'm just looking here, and there's a question: why is solar generation in BC less than Ontario for a 5 kilowatt system? What is the cost in dollars in Ontario's capital projects to install our microgrid system? I don't have the information off the top of my head. It'll be in the study, but I can also check with my colleagues, and we can get you the cost. And in terms of solar generation in BC, less than Ontario, the solar regime in BC is not as good as Ontario. We did a study 18 months ago looking at the electricity generation options across the country. We did a detailed analysis of the resource potential, and that was, of course, solar resource potential as well as wind and biomass in the different provinces. And Ontario is a much better solar regime than BC is. BC has more rain, more clouds, and as a result, the BC system is not as effective as it is in Ontario. Next question: did CERI analyze the net societal benefits in any province for significant volumes of CHP DG? There will be different results in terms of upstream costs, presumably. Yeah, we have that in our study. There's definitely a greater benefit for CHP because of the firm nature of its generation, and you also get the benefit of the heat load that reduces the electricity requirements. But you saw that we still saw a cost of CHP of about 12 cents. That's the energy cost. And the energy costs in Ontario are 3 cents. If you add in the global adjustment charge, that's 10.5 cents. So you're really talking about marginal net societal benefits there. Again, it relates to the ability of a DG owner to offset not just their energy costs, but their entire retail charge. In terms of whether or not it would affect upstream costs, it's possible. It would have to be a significant penetration of DG volumes for that, and there would have to be some form of commitment, contractual commitment, to ensure that utilities can offset or delay some of their upstream costs because you had DG in some sort of must-run situation. Next question, how would the cost of DG compare to net additions to the public grid where services needed to be upgraded on the public grid to meet demand? Well, that's basically what we were looking at, and what we've identified is that DG does not necessarily, even with significant penetration, in this case we were looking at solar, but also it would work with CHP. If you had must-run situations and they were firm power, it could help in terms of reducing the upgrading of the public grid. Otherwise, no, it doesn't. You would have to look at significant penetration that would be able to affect the public grid. It's just not there. We're not at any significant levels of DG penetration to offset the grid at this point in time. And you know, when you look at offsetting the grid upgrades, you're not actually going to look at canceling those upgrades. It's more of a delay to the upgrade. And if you're able to delay the upgrade, you're only going to be able to, from an economic point of view, claim the difference in service charges to of that 1 year or 2 year delay. So in some other analysis, there's been the presumption that the upgrade has not been needed. We have not seen any impact of DG in any utility that we've looked at, Canada and the United States, where there's been any significant cancellation of upgrades as a result of DG penetration.
I guess that's it for our questions today. But I just want to say thanks so much, Alan, for joining us today and giving us some really great information. If anybody does have any additional questions that's on the line today, feel free to reach out to us here at 360, and we can definitely get your question over to Alan, and we can get an answer for you. So again, thanks to Alan, thanks everybody for joining us today, and hope you have a great day.
Well, thank you very much. And I would like to leave you with one final thought, that there's still opportunity in terms of distributed generation for private DG owners to make a successful business case. It's just not necessarily going to provide net benefits to the overall system. There's a question here. Your table showing 25% of Ontario houses to install solar systems does not show feasible, right? No, this is just an assumption. We assumed just to see how far DG would have to penetrate to actually have any implications for the public grid. So right now, I'm not sure what the percentage is, but it's far smaller than 1 in 4 houses have an installed solar system. But if you had 1 in 4 houses in Ontario having an installed solar system, it would not affect the need for the grid.
Okay. All right. Well, failing any more questions coming in, thanks again, Alan, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.